Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court made the decision to reverse the 50-year precedent that was established in Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Employment Law After Hours is going to take a brief break from our 4-part hiring series to discuss what employers are doing to support their staff and families in obtaining comprehensive women's health care.
Before we get started, this episode is meant to be informative only and is not an editorial. However, we do want to say that we disagree with the decision and its rationale. Nevertheless, we're here to support women and their employers who make decisions and choices based on the state laws in place after the Supreme Court's ruling.
Today's episode will focus on what employers are doing to provide supportive healthcare services to women, including by providing funding to employees and their family members to travel out of state to obtain an abortion or even birth control services.
Since the Supreme Court's announcement last week, many Fortune 500 companies and even mid-level and smaller employers have announced that they would provide funding for a woman to travel out of state to obtain certain healthcare services. A few of these companies include Amazon, Apple, Bumble, Cigna, CVS, Dick's Sporting Goods, IKEA, Facebook, Netflix, Starbucks, and Uber. The policies of many of these companies can be summed up as offering out-of-state travel benefits to employees if they cannot obtain abortion care or other related services in their current state.
Looking to these companies for guidance, let's evaluate what these employee funding policies look like and some of the issues that may arise in providing abortion support financing. First, many employer policies include funding for an employee's family member as well, meaning if an employee's daughter needs to travel out of state for an abortion because of a legal prohibition in her state, the employer will provide a stipend up to a set amount for that travel, potentially covering a support person as well to travel with the recipient.
Second, the amount of money being provided varies by the employer. For example, Amazon has announced up to $4,000 in reimbursement, while Netflix has announced it is offering up to $10,000 in certain circumstances to travel out of the state. Many of these employers will verify the need for reimbursement, including the amounts, by collecting receipts for the travel. Companies will also need to decide if they will simply give the funding or modify insurance policies to include coverage through a claims process.
Third, some employers, to avoid allegations of discrimination under federal law, are also allowing employees not seeking an abortion to also receive the funding if they must travel more than a certain distance, such as 100 miles, to receive non-medically necessary services that they cannot receive within that geographic distance.
Fourth, certain employers are covering just the cost of travel, like lodging and food, and not the abortion services themselves, which can become very costly, while others are ensuring continued abortion coverage under insurance policies or otherwise providing funding for the cost of such abortion services in addition to the cost of travel.
If you're an employer that is considering implementing similar benefits for your employees, there are some concerns that you will need to consider and speak with your trusted legal attorney. The first concern that will need to be evaluated is the number of times an employee can seek this benefit. For some employers, an employee will only be able to receive the funding one time, while others have announced up to 3 times per year with an annual cap of the amount provided, such as $10,000.
The second concern for consideration is the length of employment for eligibility, meaning will an employee need to have worked for at least 6 months or a year before they're eligible. Otherwise, employers are envisioning scenarios where someone may seek quick employment just to have coverage for an abortion provided by the employer with no real goal to remain with the company. Employers will also need to consider whether the benefit will apply to both full-time and part-time employees, although most are choosing to provide the benefit to all employees regardless of the hours worked per week.
Third, employers will need to consider the best system for implementation that protects the privacy of the funding recipient. We want to encourage employees to come forward for such funding, not worry about whether everyone at work will find out about the abortion service they may have received. Employers are regulated by the Americans with Disabilities Act, which has privacy requirements when it comes to employee health services. Therefore, many employers will appoint a single person to receive the request, the receipts for the funding, and make decision on funding, a trusted long-term employee who will be sworn to confidentiality through an agreement. Other employers may choose to have their insurance representative administer the claims to avoid anyone at the company from knowing about the employee's health services. Regardless of the system selected, employers will need to ensure privacy remains at the top list when implementing the system.
Fourth, employers will need to consult with their accountants and tax lawyers regarding the tax consequences of providing this funding to employees. The employee may have to pay taxes on the received funds, and the employer may have payroll tax responsibilities. Some employers may choose to provide excess funding to employees, recognizing that a majority of the portion of the funds will go to taxes.
Fifth, employers will need to consider any state law limitations. Unfortunately, some states, such as Texas and Oklahoma, prohibit anyone from aiding and abetting abortion service, such as through funding. Although there are some legal challenges to these laws under federal preemption, employers employers will need to evaluate the risk of potentially violating a state law as well.
Sixth, employers will need to consider how far they are willing to reimburse for travel. For example, Dick's Sporting Goods is preliminarily stating that their employees who need to seek care will have to do so at the nearest possible location that can provide sufficient care. Some employers may consider putting restrictions on the distance of covered travel to reduce the funds provided, ensuring that other employees will also be able to receive such funding. Seventh, employers will need to consider possible discrimination allegations if non-childbearing individuals desire to seek out-of-state care, such as gender reassignment or other child planning services. There may be allegations of gender or sexual orientation discrimination. For this reason, many employers are keeping their coverage policies broad to include any out-of-state, non-medically necessary health services that cannot be obtained in-state. This would remove the coverage decision from such protected classes under state and federal discrimination laws.
The items discussed in this episode are very important considerations, and there are many moving parts and legal gray areas that will need to be decided in the future. It also remains unclear if these employer policies are simply empty promises, as the number of individuals seeking abortion care remains limited, and even fewer will actually be willing to request such funding out of fear of privacy concerns. For this reason, it's important that employers do all they can to ensure employees are aware of their privacy protections.
If you work at a company that would like to explore providing such benefits for your employees, please do not hesitate to give us a call or your other trusted legal advisor to explore what options may be available to you. If not, please check out these great Employment Law After Hours episodes on the screen now, and don't forget to subscribe for other great HR topic coverage. We'll see you next time.
See ya.